Hello, everyone, and welcome to the House Table Pub. Today, we're going to be talking about the dangers of the GM versus player mindset, or Game Master versus player mindset. This is a tabletop RPG topic that I've been asked about quite a few times, but also it's just a topic I've kind of been on the both ends of. For those who may be new to tabletop gaming, Game Master versus players, when there's a conflict across the table and either or, if not believe, they are trying to win. Either the player or the game master thinks they are trying to win a game. Now, as anyone who plays tabletop games can tell you, the point of them is that it's a group storytelling game. You only really win by telling a great story together. Some players, however, will sit down at a table and think that a player's death is a slight against them or an insult to their ability to play the game. Where on the inverse, some game masters sit at the table and believe that their story has to go their way, or that every combat has to have the players limping out of the fight in need of rest. But is the game master versus player mindset an actual thing that happens? What causes it? Is it easy to recognize that you as a game master or player are actively being combative to the others? How do you fix the issues if you're doing this and come to realize it? Well, let's start with my own history as a game master versus player mindset. And that is that I used to be a game master who did this. When I started game mastering, I had a player in our group who was very antagonistic to me as a game master. He had it in his mind that the game master was not allowed to tell a player no, or, if the game master decides on a ruling in one moment, they aren't allowed to change their ruling on that ever again, even if it's been months and there's more information given to them. This player was also a bit of a min-maxer and had a lot of habits that as a new game master are hard to respond to properly without someone there to help. It got to a point where, because of this specific player, I had to ramp up my challenges to the point where the party was basically a glorified entourage. The other players just weren't able to really do anything in my campaigns because I had to deal with this specific player, because no combat was even a challenge. In fact, even the final boss of that campaign was scaled to an impossible level to fight, and the player still almost killed it in just his reaction attacks, not even an actual turn. The player continued this in other campaigns as well, and it ended up making my style become very game master versus player, because I kind of always felt like I had to be ready for a player who's just going to trivialize every single encounter. And it became such a big problem that with my campaigns, if there was only a 50% TBK rate, like if 1 or 2 players out of 4 were, surviving to the end, my party considered it a successful campaign. Looking back, I was not a good game master, and I know this. I've known this for a while. I wanted to tell a story, but as soon as someone started min-maxing or, just trivializing things, my brain immediately went, well, I need to start scaling this up, because obviously they're not having any difficulties. And I remember the moment I realized it. I had just canceled a campaign about 3 sessions in because I was feeling burnt out. I wasn't enjoying running games anymore, and I couldn't figure out why. I reflected on how my campaigns had been going, talked to a few of my friends who were in the campaigns to see maybe if there was something I was missing, and a lot of them mentioned how my campaigns had moments where combat wasn't something to enjoy, but just an intense struggle where they would come out of it with almost no resources left, even if it was just a random encounter. And, a few of them had mentioned where if I were to say, oh, no, you have a chance to beat this, I was saying that even if you needed a 19 or a 20. They found it hard to trust me as a game master, and it just was not fair to them. Now, most of my experience to this point was Pathfinder 1st Edition as a game master. I ran a few sessions of Mutants and Masterminds, as well as a few tabletop games I had thrown together hastily, including even the first rendition of the Digimon campaign. But I wanted a fresh slate to be able to get my players into it and start over, basically. At first, I wanted to do a campaign where I just started with like the Pathfinder core book and then expanded as I read more of the books thoroughly, but my players weren't too interested, so I didn't even bother. Next, I decided, well, let's do 5th edition. Critical Role had been exploding. This was around 2016. At least one friend of mine was obsessed with 5th edition. And after confirming with my players they'd be interested, I got the core books, read them, the player's handbook, DM handbook, and the monster manual. Went through each page and began writing a small campaign. Even the other player who had been a problem joined in, though I asked a friend of mine to keep myself and them on track so that if things start to fall down into a game master versus player mindset, we would be able to have a discussion. And the campaign ran great. We never got to finish it, unfortunately, but that was more due to life getting off track than anything. But with the exception of players still having a trust issue anytime I would say they had a chance, a line I tried to keep myself to only use for situations that needed maybe a 10 at most, unless I was being overly sarcastic and going, well, there's chance. Like something that makes it clear that I'm being facetious. Was it a perfect solution? Not remotely. I didn't run another Pathfinder 1st edition game until this very year, and it was only because I made a deal with my buddy Volpe. Funny enough, I was using the campaign idea that began with the core book for it. My players loved what I had run so far. The campaign is on an indefinite hiatus due to life getting in the way, as it always does with tabletops, but it's a campaign I look forward to getting back to because it's Pathfinder 1st edition, which is where I'm comfortable. So what do I think really helped the situation? And the answer is I sat down and talked to people. I spoke with my players and understood the shortcomings and why they were upsetting. I had a dialogue with people to get their point of view. And this is why I always say that talking to your table is the best solution. If you're not enjoying your character, talk to your GM about swapping them. Not enjoying the current storyline, talk to your GM to see if there's an angle you're not seeing, or maybe if one can be introduced to draw you in more. As a game master, are you not enjoying the way your players are interacting with your NPCs? Talk to them about it. See if it's an issue with the NPCs or if it's an issue with how you're role-playing them. Do you not know if your players are enjoying themselves enough? Ask them, talk to them. I've even had a game where, funny enough, the above player was running a campaign, and me and the players, we all sat down one day and we're like, we're just not having fun. We pulled the GM aside and we're like, yeah, we're just not really enjoying ourselves. I don't know if something can be done to maybe fix the campaign into a way where we're all enjoying ourselves again, and the GM opened up and said, yeah, I'm not having fun either. I don't want to run the game anymore. And we said, okay, and then we just stopped playing it. And it's very important that conversation happened, because we might have kept going for months or even years without talking it out. And at the end of the campaign, it would have been a solid, thank God that's over. And then we'd have all realized none of us wanted to fucking play the campaign anyway. So sit down. If you ever have issues, sit down and talk to your players. Sit down and talk to your GM. And if you notice that there is that conflicting behavior, sit down and talk. Say, hey, I notice, like, oh, hey, Bob, I noticed that as a player, you're constantly min-maxing and making it so the encounters have to be scaled up. do you think you can dial that back a bit because it's making it harder for the rest of us to keep up without also min-maxing? Or if it's like, oh, hey, Janet, I noticed that you as a game master, you seem to, only be throwing deadly encounters at us. Even if we're rolling really well, we're still extremely struggling, and these aren't like story encounters. These are just, we came across 15 goblins and we're level 2. It's something to just sit down and talk. And that's kind of the lesson here. So that's everything I could really talk about in this topic. I know it's a fairly short one. I promise I have some fairly long form content I'm planning to get out. I just have a lot that I gotta finish with it, and it's just taken me a little bit longer than I'd like, but hopefully I'll be able to start getting back to that soon. But in the meantime, have you ever been at a table with a game master versus player mindset? Did it ever get resolved? Let me know your side of things down in the comments below, where you stand on the game master versus player issue, and if you've ever noticed that you have habits that might be considerably game master versus player. If you're new here, maybe drop a subscription, come and hang out. If you liked the video, and you enjoyed it, go ahead and down like. And yeah, if you want to come hang out, I'm live all but Mondays and Wednesdays. And if you want to join the House Tabletop Discord, the link is in the description down below. Thank everybody so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.